Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very, very honored and excited to be interviewing a very special space champion, Tom Klinkowstein. Tom is an upcoming commercial astronaut with Virgin Galactic in 2027 and will be creating a related art design project during his space flight. Tom is a professor at Hofstra University, an adjunct professor at Pratt University, and was formerly an associate professor at the Hogeschool West Brabant in the Netherlands. Tom has spoken to over 100 businesses, business design and educational groups, including the World Summit of the cities and local authorities on the Information Society Conference sponsored by the UN, the Financial Securities Industry Association, the Institute for International Research, the Magazine Publishers Association, and the New School for Information Services in Amsterdam. His work has been exhibited by many galleries in New York, in Paris, Italy, and even MIT Center for Advanced Visual Studies. As you can see, Tom is a visionary leader in art and now is combining his excitement for space together with his upcoming flight with Virgin Galactic. And I'm so curious to learn about Tom's journey of what led him to find his interest in art and space and how he kind of found himself in the aerospace sector now flying to space very, very soon. So, welcome, Tom. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Thank you. Thank you for that fairly complete introduction. Thank you so much. Yeah. Well, it started a long time ago when I was 7 years old. It started when I was 7 years old, which was when Sputnik was launched. I was in second or third grade, and the bravado of that launch, the very first satellite, um, painted a picture of something so large that it felt, even at that young age, as a place that I could help fill in the meaning of. So ever since I was seven, I have been fascinated with space as a place of hope, and I think it evolved through adulthood and to this day into it being I consider it as a persona, as a companion that's kind of just right here. I'm in my studio in Soho. I live in downtown Manhattan. I live in Tribeca, which is a neighborhood that way, about a 10-minute walk. But I consider space to be a kind of a companion, which is mostly optimistic and full of questions, and a place where I can help write the story. And I certainly couldn't have said it like that at seven or even at 14 or maybe not even 21, but it has evolved to be a companion.
Wow. And when I'm curious about how did you take this initial interest of yours and how did that change over time? Because I know you did so much, you're very accomplished in the space, in the world of art. And so over time, how did you kind of work your way into art and bring this companion, this interest of space along with you? And how has that dynamic changed over time?
Well, I and full disclosure, we spoke for a half hour before this recording started, so it was a bit similar to your own story, which was I became interested in space, but I saw no way of directly involving myself in space. I first thought I would study physics in college or university, and I was accepted, but I was pretty terrible in the other sciences. But at the same time that I was interested in physics, I was good at physics. I liked that it could explain the way a lot of things work, why this pen drops down that way. Uh, but at that time, physics was so uninteresting socially. This was end of high school time. And at that same time, like in the middle of high school, age 15, 16 or so, I started taking photos. And I noticed that when I said I was a photographer, it gave me the permission to kind of be anywhere, in the middle of the high school football game or talking to people I didn't know yet. It was a kind of excuse. And so I also applied to study photography, and I ended up choosing that. but I never lost the interest in physics or science or the fascination with space. I still saw very little direct route to become involved on a day-to-day pragmatic level, but it stayed with me the whole time. And starting in early adulthood, in my mid 20s, I I had read some publications or books from Marshall McLuhan, a very famous Canadian theoretician of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And he was like the academic version of Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was a breakthrough artist of that period. And McLuhan was like a breakthrough thinker. And he wrote a number of texts that some of my professors in undergraduate school introduced me to. And I ended up using those texts as a kind of model for my, I still to a large extent use them as a model. And he was always questioning behavior, wondering how tools change the nature of our communication and our behavior. So I started putting together experimental projects, which after moving to Europe, I lived in Europe for 10 years between age 25 and 35, in the Netherlands mostly, also in Germany and France. I started doing performances and in what we call installations, which are physical manifestations in the art world. Mostly I did them in nightclubs, like at midnight. I was like the entertainment at a Amsterdam nightclub. And I started connecting different parts of the world with very primitive versions of the technology that we're speaking with now. It's so primitive, like really a million times less capable, million or a million times less capable devices that could send a still image on a wired telephone, old wired telephone line, like one image at very low clarity. It took about 3 minutes to come up, and early fax machines. And so I made performances and these events out of fax machines, and this crude system was called slow scan television. It was actually developed for the early robotic lunar probes that landed on the moon before Apollo landed. So space was still kind of far away, but the future was right there with it, and the future itself was this blank space, and I decided I would help write that future. So I was doing things that were a little bit like social media 20, 30, 40 years before even that term existed. I would always mix for the content something very personal that only I knew with something that I thought everyone knew a little bit about, something from the news. I did one about McDonald's restaurants, in fact, when they were starting to become global. And I mixed some personal anecdotes because I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. And they were kind of mostly hated, I think, in Europe when they started to appear, at least by the artistic sector. So there was always a bit of playfulness, a bit of criticality, but always something personal in those pieces. And that was my way of like being in space because they did use early satellite technology, but actually being directly involved in a space project to the extent where now I'm 2 years away from having the ability to be in a suborbital space flight via Virgin Galactic. That that's I wasn't certain actually that I would live long enough to see that happen. So, but I kept writing. I kept doing things. I had the very first laptop computer in my last years in Europe. I commuted between Paris and Holland every week on the Trans-Euro Express. And I had this laptop computer, which was so exotic, 1983. People would come up and ask me what that is. And one of those people was the director of the European Space Agency. And so I formed an acquaintanceship with him, and he invited me to come to the European Space Agency headquarters. One of the headquarters was in the Netherlands. And so many of those sort of things, I was just constantly doing things that seemed futuristic and experimental and throwing it out there, trying things and seeing what people said about it. And I'll let you ask another question because I can go on for about 5 hours with similar kind of stories.
That is absolutely incredible. I mean, I think artists, some of the artists that I've met, including yourself, have the most interesting lives and have probably lived multiple lives as they've evolved their own art endeavors and figured out what they want to do. And I love what you say about bringing tech into art because now it's a lot more common than I'm sure it was even 5, 10 years ago. And the art world probably and is still not very accepting of this novel field of art, but is slowly starting to evolve as a whole industry. So it's really amazing to see how you were able to integrate that kind of in the beginning and put your own spin on it. So I absolutely love that. And in this journey of yours, did you have any obstacles in achieving your career goals, whether it be in the art world or, this interest for space you had when you started getting connected with the space world? Did you have any obstacles? It could be anything in your career. And if so, how were you able to overcome these obstacles?
Uh, Probably millions of obstacles. I realized that that's the gig, to use a mid 20th century term. It's that's it. If you think it's something else, you're going to fail because, if you're playing baseball and the game is football, you're going to
Right.
lose every time. So, and the game is it's like the stock market, which is something I learned about many decades after I started doing my art projects. But it goes like this all the time. It's like it's wonderful, it's terrible. It's wonderful, it's terrible. Some people love me, people don't like me, people pay me, people forget to pay me, they don't want to pay me. I get a promotion, etc. People believe me, they don't believe me. And so that is simply the nature of being an adult. And it's once you embrace that, then it's great fun once you realize that's it. It's not going to be straight line like this. There's no straight line like that. Although, on one hand, you always pretend while you're in these early art projects, I would have to raise some, in today's money, would maybe equivalent of what it would take to make a small independent film to hire satellite time and so forth, maybe the 50, $100,000 in today's money. And it was hard. It was hard. Things didn't work. The technology didn't work. People thought it was worthless, etc. And I thought, oh, okay, that's the nature of it. And just keep trying, keep trying. It's a matter of scale. And what one of my mentors said is like, what do you want and what are you willing to do to get there? That's kind of the only answer in this very American-like approach to creating your futures. And just relative to what you just said, and relative to somebody I mentioned, Marshall McLuhan, this Canadian author of the mid 20th century, he said that only artists and criminals understand the present. All the rest of the people are moving into the future, looking through, he called it the rearview mirror. People are always trying to recreate the past. Only artists and criminals are able to see the special capabilities of what the present has to offer. So I remember that and many other things you said, and they have guided me through this arduous but enormously fun journey.
And in your response, you were talking about this mentor. So I'm curious. I know we use this term in the Space Education Summit, so I wanted to kind of bring it back. Like, who gave you that gravity assist in your life to grow to where you are today? And also, as an artist, I know I'm sure, did you have this intuition like right out of college? You kind of had this artist intuition because I knew the way you were asking me questions. I was like amazed with how thoughtful they were, and I'm sure it comes after a lot of experience. So, how did this like thought process change or evolve over time as well? How did you develop this intuition?
At about your age, I decided I would just experiment and sort of do everything the opposite that my parents were doing, just to see. Because I had no idea of subtlety or gradation or being patient. I remember I did one experiment with when I was doing early, what they used to call dating. I would just, I would experiment with just saying anything that came to mind, like, and it was so crude and so like bizarre, but I actually did not understand, the nature of waiting for someone to be ready to hear something. So it was a lot of experimentation, but it was also probably the most important thing you can do if you're fortunate to grow up in the kind of places that both you and I have grown up, where you have opportunity to think and learn and build, is to find mentors. So I set out to find five or six mentors in my 20s and 30s. One whom it came about very wonderfully indirectly by reading an article in the New York Times. And I remember the headline. It said, McLuhan scholar says A-bomb may be good. And so this was a guy who worked with Marshall McLuhan, this author. And it was an article in the 1970s. His name is Derek Kirchhoff. And I went and found him, and he was my first translator of my very first international presentation, which I gave in Locarno, Switzerland. And he speaks about seven languages. Um, so one, I went and looked for mentors. Another was a lawyer. I took a law class in my graduate degree, which has had to do with video, but I took one constitutional law class that I loved because I love the way lawyers think. I went to lots and lots of art events, and one of them, one of the early ones, was with Laurie Anderson, who's still a very productive experimental performance artist. So I imposed myself on her, and she became a mentor for a decade or so. And she was so observant. She would look at an American power plug and she would see a face. I said, "Oh, yeah, it's about like pattern recognition and like not seeing a power plug as a power plug, but oh, there's a face there. And then what can you do with that observation?" And a number of other people, like a group of designers in Texas, of all places, that I read about in a UK design magazine, who like to work in the evening. So they just hired a daytime person to answer their phone, and they also installed like recording devices in their pickup trucks because they lived in Texas, and they just drove around in the afternoons and the evenings recording their ideas, and they give these, that time it would be audio cassette, to this person who worked during the day to transcribe their ideas. And I wrote to them, and this was pre-internet for the most part, so it was like airmail letters that would take about a week to get there from the Netherlands. And I just kept writing all lots and lots and lots and lots of people. And they wrote and they said, "Why did you come and see us? You just have to answer one question. What would you do if you could do anything?" That was the question. And I wrote an essay, and they actually sent me a ticket to come visit them in Texas. So it's like, I'm certain you've had, it's like you try 100, 1,000 times, and things will work. It's like not stopping. A lot of people stop after three times. Got to do it 300 times or 3,000 times. But finding mentors has been one of the best parts of that part of my life, certainly.
I love that, especially what you were saying about a lot of people give up after that third time when they're about to achieve success or you need to go a little bit more. It was like a similar saying. I heard this video, I think it was Jack Ma, who was saying like people fail right before they're about to achieve their success. So 99% of the population never sees that success because they give up right before they're going to get success.
Yeah.
And so that fear of like, oh, you're just about to get it, but you're giving up right before. You have to keep pushing. That mentality is, it's a very difficult one, but if you can get there like that, it really does take you forward. So I love that. And I'm glad to hear about your own relationship with your mentors because I have a very similar experience. So finding mentors who can kind of push you in the right direction is very key. And so I'm curious kind of now in this next stage of your life, now that you've
Yeah.
built more of a space career and you're finding your way, you're about to go on a flight. What is your goal for the next maybe 5, 10 years, your current goals and your next few years goal in your artistic world?
I've been an academic now almost 5 decades, believe it or not. So I have been teaching ever since my mid 20s, and I've realized that the work I do and the work my students do, whatever they're doing for one of my courses, it's always about them. So I have realized that all of this investment and all of this great privilege of trying so many things and finding so many resources it's a way for me to further understand who I am. And so this upcoming 2 years from now, suborbital spaceflight with Virgin Galactic, which also came about after writing Virgin Galactic probably 50 times since they were started in the early 2000s. And they didn't answer me till a year and a half ago after starting to write to them in the early 2000s. It's about me. It's about like, what is this persona? What does it say about me?
Wow.
What are its characteristics? The second part of that persona piece is I realized that dialogue is also in this almost holy or spiritual place for me. Uh, Somebody spoke to me about 10 years ago about an essay was written about a century ago, 1926, 1927. It's a German essay called Ich und Du, and it's translated as I and Thou in English. And this author, this German religious scholar from the early 20th century, said that dialogue is the most sacred place of human existence. And he said God lives there. And so I consider this event 2 years from now as a not an end, but a fitting marker to this journey that started when I was 7, and to further understand who I am and to further give value to others through this wonderful gift, this kind of well-earned gift, if I do say so myself, because I actually started saving because I this is going to be so expensive if it ever becomes possible. But I started like living below my means when I came back to the United States in my mid 30s and said, I'm just going to keep putting money aside. I found a financial advisor. I realized when I came back that I had very little resources and that I was something I needed to figure out how to do. And I've done that, and it made it possible to elect that choice when it came about a year and a half ago through Virgin Galactic.
I'm simply in awe by your persistence. I think that's something I wish I can continuously do in my life. And I know with many students, it's one of the struggling pieces. I'm a firm believer that if you, even though you're not maybe as smart as some of the smartest people in the world, if you're hardworking and you're persistent, you'll one day achieve your goal or at least become very close to doing so, if not doing better than what you dreamed of. And so to see kind of your journey from the early 2000s to now, kind of almost there, fulfilling your dreams, I am so excited to see your flight to space. And, I think it really is a testament to your persistence. And so now that we're able to learn a little bit about your journey and your work, my last and final question for you is if you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that advice be? And it can be anything really to life or career. I feel like you are living, a very amazing life in the sense that you worked really hard for everything you got. I can really tell by your story. And so I'm sure you've learned many things. And I wonder if you could go back in time and tell yourself something, what would that be?
I love that question because I've been asking myself that question for about a half a century. So it's a great question. And as relative to that question, I have starting about your age or a couple of years older, I started making these like, what would I do if I could do anything kind of lists. And um, and I would give myself a grade for the last list. So the only regret on just about every one of these kind of 5-year plans has been the times where, for whatever reason, I didn't. So I always, since I'm a professor, I give myself grades. I always give myself an A minus. The minus is because, oh, those times that I was too reticent to talk to somebody that I wanted to speak with, or I was maybe too busy writing something to notice that something else was happening nearby that I at least could make note of or engage with. So it would be that. It would be, and one of my mentors also told me, meet 10 new people every week, which I have also been doing like for half a century. So meet 10 new people every week. And so the rare week where I have not been able to meet 10 new people would be probably the the thing I tell myself, if I could tell myself again from when I was your age, to say, no, meet 10, meet 15, meet 20, meet 100. It's like talk to people all the time, get used to. Most of them are not going to be that interested in speaking with you. It's the 100 to 1 rule, which is talk to 100 people, one will be interesting. And the 1,000 to 1 rule, like one in 1,000, will be instrumental in some kind of change in your life.
I love that. I know I will carry that advice with me. I mentioned during our conversation earlier that sometimes I can be an introvert, but I'm trying to get better at that. And so definitely I will keep that in mind. And I'm sure everyone who's listening will keep that in mind as well. I think we really are starting to realize the power of connections and how the world can become small when you start meeting everybody in a certain community and, names start to click and you start to realize you know people through two or three other people. And so those types of connections and learning from other people who have unique upbringings, unique interests can add a lot of value in your own life. So I love that enriching yourself through other people is something we need to put a more conscious effort of doing and in a good way, in a positive way, maybe apart from social media. And so I will definitely carry that advice with me. So thank you so much, Tom, for doing this interview with us. I am rooting for you. I'm so excited to see your flight, and I can't wait to hear all about it post-flight. So thank you so much for taking your time to share your story with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. And absolutely, we'll do another one of these in 2 years, if not sooner.
I would love that. Thank you.